Good evening, everybody. This is Cinnamon Noir.
And this is the Ramen Shaman.
Welcome back to Epistory. Today, in what should have been the final episode, we are going to go to the last dungeon. There was a little bit of a recording snafu, so unfortunately we'll either have to have a epilogue video after this, or just try to mash the two together, which I'm not very good at.
Well, it happens.
Anyway, today we'll be wrapping everything up. The last dungeon is a little bit longer than most of the others, but the main reason why this video is as long as it is that we'll also be collecting a lot of treasure and doing some of the big fights that are all around the island. Yeah, I figured it might be an interesting thing to do. For one thing, it'll show off the difficulty changes. So
That's
right now,
enough.
for this one, this is one of the last ones in the game. Not oddly enough one of the hardest ones, just one of the last ones you can get to geographically. But it does definitely orient itself around wind. Wind is very useful in this one. Appropriately, because you have to use wind to get here.
Fair enough.
So I'm going to be doing, I think, 3 or 4 of these. The first one is going to be at the regular, the adjusted level of difficulty. But then I'm going to go down to easy, just to show you what that's like. And then the hardest difficulty that's below adaptive, which is still incredibly easy compared with adaptive difficulty.
So I'm guessing adaptive is like a special setting?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this before. Adaptive really does mean it gets harder as you go. Like, if you manage to get through each fight, then the next one will be faster.
You mentioned that part, I just didn't know how it worked relative to other difficulty settings.
I really have no idea. I think it's just a bunch of set speeds. From what I can tell, it has nothing to do with the difficulty of the words, because there's actually a separate difficulty slider that you can choose for how difficult you want the words to be. That one you can't select on the fly. You have to actually select that in the main menu. So apparently the words we've been seeing are the most complicated words that the people who made this game know. Not terribly surprising, since I think a lot of them are French, but you know. French or French-Canadian, you can never really tell. Like, you know, another typing game I liked a lot, the Icarus Proud Bottom series. They're Canadian, and one of them I'm pretty sure is French-Canadian.
I mean, you could just Google it, right?
Well, sure, but, you know, important
You
things are
said,
going
like,
on right now.
You can't really tell.
Well, how many video game developers that you know of can you look up what their ethnic origin is?
I think most, if
Really?
you know the company name.
Well, no, that's not exactly the same thing. See, you're thinking like Ubisoft, right? They're French, so most of their designers are probably French. But this is a small company, so where it's headquartered might not be the same as where most of its people are from.
That's true. I guess it depends on how much information you have on the people who wrote it.
But you have shamed me into looking it up, so here we go. Holy Wow Studios. I do remember one of them is named Jacqueline Lally. Something like that. Yeah. And the other is Dan Vecchio. I guess neither of those is really French, so they must just be regular Canadians. What's the Dungeons and Dragons class for when you're just a normal person?
There's a couple. I think you're thinking Commoner.
Yeah, they're like common Canadians.
Commoner is kind of the joke class, though.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's literally the worst of everything.
Really? See, that's funny. I like the games which sort of play with that. Like, for instance, in Final Fantasy III, the class that all of your characters start off as Onion Knight, which is a joke because in Japanese there's a pun where the word for green onion is used to describe like someone who's young and callow.
That is weird because...
So green onion is like youngster.
That is one of 3 entirely different contexts I have heard the term Onion Knight, 2 of which were Japanese.
Well, there's Onion Man from Dark Souls, but I don't think he's actually called Onion Knight. It's just he looks like one.
He's not called Onion Man. Are you thinking of Sigmire of Katarina?
Fans call him Onion Man.
I've never heard a fan...
The Dumb Shit's Guide to Dark Souls calls him Onion Man, and that, of course, is where I get all of my real Dark Souls lore.
Okay, that makes sense, but that's probably just their nickname. No.
They also call humanities sexy Jews. I think in
Knights
general it's better.
The Knights of Katarina are nicknamed Onion Knights because of their armor.
Oh, okay. Is that in-game?
Yes.
Oh, that's a dangerous level of self-awareness.
No,
Anyway.
No, it's actually a point of the lore that it really pisses them off.
That's great. Fantasy racism is the best kind of racism, I've got to say. Anyway.
But is there some kind of pun there in Japanese?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. The green onion in Japanese, or leek. It's like the same thing as saying someone is what behind the ears.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So the Onion Knight is a pretty weak class, until you level it up all the way to the highest level, at which point they can use any weapon and become the best class in the game, from a stats perspective. It's like the Magikarp of Final Fantasy, and no other game has it as far as I can tell.
That is weird.
It's fun.
No, in D&D, Commoner is just literally the worst of all classes. It has, like, the physical stats
worse than Bard?
Of a wizard without any of the other benefits of being a wizard.
Wow. That's rough. I guess the idea being a commoner is like someone who hasn't learned any special skills. So a wizard also would not learn any combat skills because they've spent their whole life reading in a library somewhere.
Exactly.
It's an interesting concept.
Yeah, all of the NPC classes were kind of deliberately underpowered.
Oh, you're saying the NPCs all have classes?
Yeah, they have NPC classes.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. I would love it if NPCs had, like, weird classes, like sewer worker.
I think that would all be either commoner or expert.
I know, I just like the idea of a world where the NPCs are given as much attention as the player characters.
And of course you can have NPCs with player classes.
Anyway, back to the game we're actually playing right now. So, you may have noticed I set it on insane difficulty, which is the highest manual difficulty setting you can put in this game. And they still seem pretty slow compared with the adaptive difficulty.
I want to see you try Typing of the Dead or Typing of the Dead Overkill.
You'll have to buy it for me, because it's not the kind of thing I'd get for myself.
True enough. I actually have it.
Really? Then can't you give it to me, like, right now?
I mean, it's tied to my Steam.
Boy, that's going to sound awkward out of context anyway.
Okay,
no, so
well,
this... no. Typing of the Dead. Typing of the Dead. I have never played it. I have seen it being played, I think, by the Freelance Astronauts.
Interesting.
Oh, I love the Freelance Astronauts. I was so sad when they stopped making stuff. It's been a long time. It's been like 5 years they haven't been around. It just happens, you know? It happens with a lot of people on the internet. Ralph the Movie Maker just announced he's not making any more videos, you know? He's going to be busy working on being an actual film student. Which really I think is just a waste.
I'm disappointed that cryptocurrency isn't one of the long words for this.
That would be good. Blockchain? That'd be another one. Is that in the dictionary, by the way, yet? Like, as an actual word?
Blockchain? No idea.
I wonder.
I think they tend to hold off on a lot of technical terminology in general.
I think they put YOLO in there like 2 years after it came out.
Well,
Definition of blockchain by Merriam-Webster. But this is the online version. Oh, and here's a list of words that are trending now, which are going to be absolutely freaking ridiculous. Mistrial, hogwash, probity, sequacious, and inadmissible. Sequacious is the one that confuses me.
Yeah, mistrial and inadmissible both made sense given
And probity, yeah.
current political news, but
Indeed.
enough of that.
But hogwash? I mean, how many people look up hogwash on a daily basis? You know, it literally just occurred to me that hogwash would mean something you would wash a hog with, like filthy water, or less euphemistically, crap.
Shit, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That never even occurred to me.
That actually kind of does make sense as like a sort of less explicit variant of essentially
But
bullshit.
it didn't occur to me until just now that it is almost literally the same thing. Technically, it's mud. Hogwash is mud. That's what hogs wash themselves with. But... God, that reminds me of some weird stuff. Like, did you ever read the book Farmer Boy when you were in school?
I don't think so.
It's like part of the Laura Ingalls Wilder expanded universe. Like, it's not one of the Little House on the Prairie stories, but it's written by her. You know what I'm talking about.
No. I'm just that's just a phrase that's gonna stick with me forever now.
I'm hoping they'll make the movie out of it. Anyway, I loved Farmer Boy. It was one of my favorite books when I was a kid. But one of the things that happens is the kid in it, Almanzo Wilder, who, spoilers, later marries Laura Ingalls Wilder, hence why he got a book written about his childhood. He buys a pig, and he has to deal with all the anti-pig prejudice. You know, people saying they're dirty. He's like, actually, pigs aren't dirty. They keep themselves very clean. The whole stereotype just comes from the fact that they like to wallow in mud.
Well,
Which, let's be honest, any creature, any mammal that gets hot would want to do that. Elephants do it.
as a former rat owner, I can kind of sympathize.
I never knew you owned a rat.
Oh yeah, I used to.
Huh.
I owned a pair of them.
Wow. Anyway, I'm pretty sure pigs can't sweat, which is why they want to do the wallowing in mud thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised dogs don't do it more, to be honest. Because you know dogs can't sweat.
I didn't know that, but it makes sense.
Really? It's the reason why they pant so much. It's the only way they have to work off heat. So anyway, this was a bit of, how to put it, catharsis for me, this last battle, because that's the one that kicked my ass 3 times, and then I just changed the difficulty and beat it.
Dogs do have kind of an infamous reputation for, like, getting themselves wet or messy.
That is true. I don't know if it's for the same reason, though. I think it's because dogs are curious. I think that's the real reason. Curious and not fastidious.
True. Sorry to go off topic. I was looking at
not at all.
menu, and it looked like you had toggleable adaptive difficulty and a fixed difficulty setting.
No, not quite. What happens is it's either adaptive or not, and if you turn adaptive off, then you can set it manually. It doesn't bother you showing you the manual setting menu if you have it on adaptive.
Sure.
That wouldn't make much sense, you know? You can't have it be adaptive and easy. Although, that is an interesting idea. I think a game that was sufficiently complex might be able to work with that, having a bounded adaptive difficulty.
That's what I was thinking. Like
it can go between easy and medium, or so on.
Have adaptive difficulty, but with a variable baseline.
That's actually a good idea. Why has no one done that? I've never heard of that before.
I mean, that's kind of what RE4 did.
Did it?
With normal, easy, and professional.
Oh, yeah, you're right. But they all have an adaptive difficulty aspect to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep forgetting that.
I
keep forgetting that RE4 actually changes the difficulty. I guess it's because, some games you think more about the mechanics, and some you don't as much. It's hard for me to imagine what the numbers are behind the behavior of characters in Resident Evil 4. Because it's all very immersive. I know that word is overused, but... I don't think of how much health an enemy has in RE4, because 1, you tend to be able to get rid of them very quickly, and 2, it's not something you think about.
It definitely is noticeable, the fact that enemies tend to drop ammo that fits with the weapons.
That is definitely true. Although, that is also less unique. Even the original Metroid did that.
Fun fact, actually, if you're playing with the Mine Thrower, which, for the record, I actually quite recommend.
Yeah, I know you've used the Mine Thrower. Very brave.
But if you're playing with the Mine Thrower and you try to, you actually want to run through your ammo pretty regularly, because if you're stockpiling it, even
I see what you mean. You'll never get any more.
The drop rate. Yeah, the ammo drop rate will decrease dramatically. No,
Resident Evil 4, I think, is very much based around the idea that you want to use up what you have right now. It doesn't... It's really, in some ways, the opposite of the original Resident Evil games. Resident Evil, if you could refrain from using good items early on, you'd be frickin' set in the late game. I have had playthroughs of the Resident Evil remake on GameCube, where the last 2 or 3 hours has been a joke.
I do not like the original Resident Evil. I just really don't.
Really? Have you played the GameCube remake or just the one on PlayStation?
I've tried a bit of the GameCube remake.
Well, I definitely recommend the remake over the original, which I have not played the original, only the remake. For one thing, it's beautiful. I mean, it is, I think, to this day, prettier than the vast majority of any kind of game. Because since it's all pre-rendered, it's like it's not even fair. It's not competing on the same grounds as most games.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it does feel immersive. You can walk around it, even though it's all basically an elaborate wallpaper. But I love the Resident Evil remake. It's not quite as fun to replay as Resident Evil 4, really what is, but it's got its own charms. I've played it through 3 or 4 times.
Interesting.
It's also a really great, just place to be in. As a virtual space, it feels very real.
What about RE2 and 3?
Never played them.
Ah.
I didn't own a PlayStation for a very long time, and now that I own a PS2, I'm much more interested in playing through stuff like Symphony of the Night than I am Resident Evil 2 and 3. Also, I hate the story.
Interesting.
The original Resident Evil was simple enough, self-contained around the mansion, that it didn't go crazy. Resident Evil 2 and 3 have just batshit crazy storylines.
One thing I'm noticing about Easiest is enemies are slower and they seem to have less words, but word length doesn't seem to be changing as much.
That's right. I never thought about the fewer words. They might, in fact, have fewer words. I didn't think about that. All I can really tell is that they're much slower.
Yes.
Which is a very, very noticeable difference. We're going to see how different at the very end of this Let's Play, but that's anticipating.
Honestly, the thing about the higher difficulties where they come at you faster is with powers like electricity, that just gives you more targets for the electricity to hit.
Exactly. These big guys, the big worms, are actually my favorite enemies in the entire game because they make every other enemy easier.
Mm-hmm.
No, this game, I think I've said this before, but it bears repeating. It is really original and clever in the way it uses its mechanics. It seems at first like it's really simplistic, and it's just, type these words as fast as possible. But this is more strategy, like being able to use different enemies in a different order that I've seen in almost any typing game.
Yeah.
I think it barely manages to break free of its genre, which, for most games, breaking free of the genre is not possible. For a typing game, it's freaking incredible. This would be like if the Icarus Proud Bottom mystery series, suddenly the 2D world shattered and we were running around a 3D environment fighting bugbears. That's the kind of, opening up this game has. It's not that much, actually, no. I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean.
Little bit.
I was going to say, another thing about the Resident Evil games, the reason why I wouldn't get them, is that I am a complete cheapskate, and those games still have such a good reputation that they are still very expensive to buy secondhand. Your typical Resident Evil 2 or 3 will cost $20 on the spare market. And I tend to buy games that are $8.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure $8 is how much I spent for the Resident Evil remake on GameCube, which... Whew. Cheapest work of art I've ever purchased, I'll definitely say that.
True enough.
Well, it's not entirely fair. I mean, I bought Magical Mystery Tour for $2. That's pretty damn cheap. And it's silly, but you can't argue it's not a work of art.
Okay. I probably
it's an album,
but I guess I won't.
All music is a work of art.
That's
no,
true.
This, we're playing a video game, so this is the kind of place to talk about this. All of these things are works of art. That doesn't mean they're good. The fact that saying something is a work of art connotes quality is just a semantic fault of our language.
I guess.
Maybe we need a new word, I don't know.
One that Salvador Dali enthusiastically tried to rectify.
What? Our language?
No, the idea that works of art.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you think he's good? How about Marcel Duchamp?
I think Jackson Pollock's probably the...
you know what? I have to say, Marcel Duchamp is worse than Jackson Pollock. Because Jackson Pollock's stuff was, brain dead. And, I'm not necessarily criticizing him, but what it appeals to and the kind of critics who thought it was brilliant, I think they're idiots. But at least it can be conceived as kind of aesthetic. Like, a lot of Pollock paintings would make great doormats, or, like, wallpaper. There are things to hang on your wall. And kind of like Piet Mondrian, who just did squares in red, blue, and yellow. It's somewhat decorative. It's just it doesn't feel like it rewards scrutiny very much. Like, you could hang it on a wall and it would fit in. You know what I'm talking about?
Pollock always seemed just like a parody of modern art to me.
I guess.
Like, I'm just gonna literally throw splatter paint across a campus, and you fuckers will pay for it.
Well, all I'm saying is I've read a lot of art books, and there are people who are so much worse. I mean, like, have you ever heard of Eve Klein?
Who?
Eve Klein.
Nope.
Who not only pioneered the practice of painting a canvas with one color and calling that a work of art, he invented a kind of blue. It's called International Klein Blue. But also he had a type of painting in which naked women would roll around in paint and then slap their bodies against canvas. And that was the art. I think he may have sold tickets. He may or may not also have called it mud wrestling while he was selling the tickets. But the end product they called art, and art critics actually defended it as, I think the word they used was bold?
Yeah, that's kind of, I would actually call Jackson Pollock's work bold, but I think it takes brass balls to ask for several million for something like that.
Maybe that's all that critics mean when they say bold. It's like, he was a crazy man to paint it, and I'm crazy for selling it to you. And I think you're crazy enough to buy it. That's what bold means.
Honestly, I could almost get behind... Okay, that's not the right turn of phrase to use. I could almost...
This is just a gold mine for taking things out of context.
Naked people, like, rolling around on a canvas as art over what, say, Pollock did.
To me, it's not the medium that matters, it's the result. So what I'm saying is, if a naked woman could roll around in paint, slap herself on canvas, and produce the Mona Lisa by doing that, I would be very impressed.
She didn't know how she arrived in the desert. No footsteps in the sand.
Yes, I guess so.
Anyway, this is the final dungeon. And it is actually fairly more complicated than the rest. It's not only bigger, but there's also this new mechanic where you can go up on these promontories. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And look out over the level.
She said.
What?
She had to cross the desert.
Okay, are we still in metaphors? And
Yes.
Oh.
The desert was littered with the scars of...
So those little, things that look like chimneys rising out of the ground, every time you activate one of those, you will hear a line of dialogue from the real person, not the one that we're pretending to be. And basically, as the last level, this is a summary of all the levels we've seen before. So that first thing we just heard was, I think, her talking about the fox she rescued to her mom. And she said, "Don't hurt him, he's my friend."
Oh!
So right now we're in childhood. But pretty soon we're going to see some more of her life. Or hear it, rather.
She couldn't remember who they had been, nor what battle they had given their lives to.
But overall, this is, thematically, the desert, I think, is supposed to represent forgetfulness. The fact that it's this big, empty expanse.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think it's sort of the threat of what awaits her if she doesn't get back her consciousness. You know, it's all just going to dry up.
True. Be lost in time like tears in rain.
Like tears in the desert. Yeah, I do think it's interesting that Blade Runner's reputation seems very much based on that speech.
Well, I mean, I talked about this with you when we saw it.
Mm-hmm.
The weird thing about that speech is it just feels completely incongruous with all the rest of the scene.
Yes, I can understand why it makes sense thematically. It does kind of seem to come out of nowhere, emotionally. Mm-hmm. But he does know he's dying, and he probably knows that he's about to die right then. So he just wants to talk to somebody. He wants to unload his feelings, I think is the way it works. And maybe at the same time he wants to prove that he has feelings.
Who am I?
It's just Rutger Hauer's acting up to that point was so almost comical
Right.
that
Well,
it kind of undermines.
it's cynical, his behavior. He doesn't actually seem that impassioned about what he's doing.
True.
The two parts where he really shows some kind of emotional reaction, I think, are one where he kills the guy who made him, where it's just pure unbridled rage. And then him grabbing Decker's hand and pulling him up is, I think, supposed to show that he can rise above what's happened to him. That even though he's been kicked around his whole life, his capacity to show compassion to someone else makes him a real human being, no matter what anyone else might think about him.
I guess.
I'm probably sounding a little pretentious right now, but that's how I interpret it. I don't even like Blade Runner that much, and I do admire what that's getting at.
Blade Runner is kind of a pretentious movie. Let's be perfectly honest.
It is. A lot of cyberpunk is. A lot of noir is, and cyberpunk is basically a kind of noir.
Still,
I owe
it's
that
better than,
insight to
Jared
Mr.
Leto
Vito.
in the second Blade Runner.
What isn't? Wait, he was in that?
Blade
I
Runner-
thought you were talking about him as the Joker.
No, he was in Blade Runner. I think it's 2049.
2049.
they called it.
Yeah. By the way, they're cutting that really close, aren't they? I guess it's in the spirit of the original, where it was supposed to be like 1990 something.
Mm-hmm.
So they were like, it's a tradition. You know, we're going to do something completely unrealistic.
It's honestly, I think I actually.
Where is everyone?
I mean,
She asked the burning
I found it
sun,
very
but the
flawed, but I
silent
think
star did not reply.
if you like
I
the
am not
original,
going to
you
fail
probably
this
won't hate
I
it.
am not.
A lot of people, to me, just seem to be impressed with the giant naked Ana de Armas hologram,
Oh yeah,
which was weird.
That was weird. Just having that in the middle of the street.
She was like the computer from Spike Jonze's Her. Anyway. The difference is that Joaquin Phoenix actually is an amazing actor. And yet, I don't know why Hollywood execs seem to think Jared Leto is, like, perfect for these deep, nuanced roles. Like, how did he impress them this much? Because they gave him the Joker, they gave him, you know, the Rutger Hauer part, like you just said. They must really think a lot of him.
And he's terrible as a Joker.
Yeah.
At least
How much of that is direction, though, do you think?
I think it's Jared Leto. Like,
Okay.
if you see interviews with him and all the weird demented shit that he did to his co-workers.
No, it's style over substance. He heard that, you know, that Heath Ledger did all this crazy crap when he was going to be the Joker, and he was like, I'm going to do that too. And that will mean my part will be just as good.
Yeah, and this was also more making other people's lives miserable too. Like the
Oh, you think he's
Joker-
an asshole?
Heath Ledger mostly just sort of hung out in his trailer and got drunk.
Best method acting, I gotta say. Best method.
But no. Jared Leto in Blade Runner 2049 he's very entertaining to watch, I'll give him that.
Yeah, he does. He loves to ham it up. Maybe the people
really
who did
does.
Suicide Squad think that's all the Joker needs is a lot of cheese.
Yeah, I guess.
Big ol' ham and cheese sandwich.
I don't know. That movie was terrible for many different reasons.
Yeah, I'm glad I have not seen Suicide Squad. I've seen enough clips from it to know I would
You
never
should be.
like it.
I actually went into that genuinely thinking it was going to be good.
Yeah. Well, it's got to be said, you know, Greg, you and I are very different. You go to a lot of movies in the theater. I go to literally zero. I don't think I've seen a movie in a theater for 2 years.
I guess.
So, you know, you actually get to experience these things when they're out, which is its own, you know, experience. And I don't get any of it. So who's worse off? You for suffering the bombs? Or me?
Probably. But
That's a great response to an either-or question. Who's better off? Probably.
no, you said me for suffering the bombs, and I said probably.
Probably, yes.
Or
Yeah.
who's
No, I
worse
agree.
off,
I think it's you. Obviously I do. Otherwise, I would go to more movies.
I don't know. That one just upset me.
These days, I get most of my enjoyment of modern blockbusters from Red Letter Media.
True.
Just hearing them talk about it. I do really enjoy just hearing people talk about things.
Mm-hmm.
There aren't that many things that I think it's really important for me to experience for myself. Some video games, definitely, but very few movies. Anyway, here's another one of those puzzles where you just got to track down a bunch of squares. I'm not sure if this... Yeah, that one's mandatory, which is probably why it wasn't too difficult. Because honestly, I screwed that one up a lot. You could see that.
Yeah.
That was easier than some of the ones we had in the Ice Mausoleum, which was only the third dungeon in the whole game. Sorry, fourth. Yeah, this is a long level, but I wouldn't say it's that difficult. It's more like a thematic summary of what's gone before than a mechanical one.
Shifting sediment offered no sympathy.
Technically, any fight that you have after you've gotten all the powers is summing up all the mechanical stuff in this game, since...
Yeah.
Oh, you know, I didn't even notice this until now, but the little chimneys, which tell you things, they're all named after the levels, which is a dead giveaway that it's telling you what happened during that time.
What the hell is this?
This is the hardest one of these puzzles in the game. You
just have to do it really quick.
Yeah, it's kind of testing whether you've really gotten a hang of that special way of getting around. You know, what is it? It's EFIJ controls. You could do it with WASD. That might even be easier, but I tried to do it their way. Anyway, what we just saw was the Ice Mausoleum thing where her mom died. So, yeah. Rough times.
Ice Mausoleum is just such a weird name.
Well, it makes sense. The ice is... It's about how you feel when something like that happens to you. You're just frozen in place, rooted to the ground. You can't think. And it's lonely. The loneliness, I think, is what it was getting at there.
She wondered if any of this
And of course, a desert is also an appropriate place to signify loneliness.
If she was just
True
a
enough.
mirage.
Not that Final Fantasy has ever played it that way. You know, Final Fantasy has lots of different regions, too, but I don't feel like they do a good job of doing them thematically, or, like, psychologically tying them in. The Far Plane was good for that in Final Fantasy X. But then after, like, Sin attacks them all, they just wake up in a desert, and it's ridiculous. Huh?
What happened there? You almost died there.
Well, that's what happened. I screwed up.
Just some fairly easy
Nothing
enemies.
special.
It's just weird.
Yeah, I know. Maybe I got complacent because, I don't know if you've noticed, but I stopped leveling up a long time ago.
She said to
The cap is 20,000 and I'm at 32,000.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, the cap is 200,000.
200.
Oh, I didn't notice that before. Okay, so, yeah, the things don't actually have the same names as the levels. They have the name of the thing that happened when she was in the level. So that's actually Creation City, the mortgage thing. So the difficulty of living on your own, of course, is not just being by yourself, but it's increased responsibility. Things like a mortgage. Although it is interesting that that was the word they used, because most people who go to live by themselves after college don't have a mortgage.
Not
rent.
off the bat, no.
Yeah, it's not typical. Anyway, here's a puzzle that ought to be familiar to anyone who's played Zelda, and ought to be infuriating to anyone who's played Zelda. There's 4 lamps, they all have to be lit at the same time, and they all have different cooldown times.
Oh.
Yeah. There's a little bit of wiggle room here, but not much.
There you go.
Just enough to not make it nail-bitingly annoying. Unlike a lot of parts of Zelda, where it is. But at least in those games, you're not getting around with, like, a weird control scheme and stuff.
True enough.
Anyway, here's pretty much, I think, the last safe in the game, containing one of the last fragments. These fragments are not showing her, they're showing what I think is a scene next to her hospital bed. You can see a lot of cards.
Oh.
And presumably they're get well cards.
It was unforgiving. She wanted to lie down, to succumb to its eternal weight.
Opening day tomorrow. I still
So
can't
watercolor, that's referring to the attempts at creativity shown in the mine,
Her to give in.
where she was
had
trying
to
to become a
reach the
painter
limits.
and having some trouble. Lacking in inspiration, I think. Obviously, this game's artistic style is inspired very much by watercolors, so I think that probably hit pretty close to home.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell the types of colors they use. They're watercolor. Sorry. The term is just watercolors. Oil paint, which I've been getting into recently, is a lot more intense and bright.
Mm-hmm. How's that going?
It's interesting. I haven't been able to paint much lately because the weather's been absolutely terrible. And you want to be able to paint outside, or at least in some place with good ventilation, because whatever you use to clean off your paint thinner is probably going to reek with really toxic fumes. I use mineral spirits, which I definitely recommend. Some people use turpentine. But turpentine, being an aromatic hydrocarbon, is a potential carcinogen. So, you got to be careful about that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. My dad talks about back when he was a factory manager. He had a bunch of people in the factory who, having gotten oily stuff on their hands, they would wash it off with benzene.
Ew.
They would just turn on the benzene tap and wash their hands in it. And Dad was like, that's a really bad idea. Because my dad was a chemist.
Yeah, no kidding.
Basically, it'd be like if you worked in an asbestos factory and you flossed your teeth with asbestos water. Anyway. No, but I'm enjoying oil painting. It's fun to be able to get out your thoughts. It is very messy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little secret to washing your hands, because since the paint is oil-based, it won't come off with water. You have to soak your hands in vegetable oil of some kind. A lot of people recommend olive oil.
I'd heard of olive oil, actually.
And, that ties in with my interest in history, because the Romans usually washed themselves with olive oil.
I did not know that. I know they use it as food.
Well, of course. But no, they would wash with water sometimes. But in some cases, what they would do is they would put the olive oil on themselves, and then they would use a strigil, which is a scraping stick,
to
scrape the
off.
oil and dirt off. Mm-hmm. It was a pretty luxurious thing to do. You'd do it in the baths.
Mm-hmm.
Probably with slaves helping you, because that was ancient Rome for you. That's the way it is.
It was.
Anyway, so this barren, empty place is now even more barren and empty because I got rid of all the enemies. But I was trying to make sure I didn't miss anything. Actually, I did miss something. I'm not going to get the last fragment, but this was never 100% run, so I think we're okay. Instead, we are going to do the last battle.
Sands rose around.
Not the C.S. Lewis book, but the one in this game.
I was actually going to make an Aslan reference there.
Beat you to it. Beat you to the Aslan.
The way you pronounce that has always
Terrible
seemed
things
weird.
crawled out from
Aslan?
Aslan.
What, are you making fun of my accent? That's because I lived in the South for 6 years? You think I can't say Aslan right?
Have you actually had a southern accent at some point in your life?
I have never had a southern accent, but I did live in the South. My sister was actually made fun of because she had a southern accent for a little while. My accent was defined in Chicago, which is why I have such a nasal voice. That and because I'm just a smug dick. But, no. Anyway, my sister, when she came back up north to go to school, she would talk about how much she missed sweet tea.
Oh, God.
And they would just rip her to shreds for it. Her sorority sisters, who were never very nice. But, no, I never had a southern accent. For some reason, probably because I spent a lot of time by myself, I just never picked it up. But I do know how to imitate a southern accent somewhat.
I don't know. I think, living, like, a couple miles away from the Mason-Dixon line
from Kentucky,
has given me
yeah,
a tendency to swallow or mumble syllables.
That is an interesting idea. Yeah, I have no idea. Could be. These days, I'm much more interested in English accents. Like, I've really gotten into the Wessex kind of accent, where you have really round vowels. Part of it is I'm reading books with that kind of character in it, so I like to read out the characters. I do audiobooks, just for fun.
I'm actually getting really into audiobooks, but that's because I had an Audible subscription and I had like 5 credits saved up.
Yeah. And because we need to mention this, we are not sponsored by Audible. Most YouTubers are, so, we need to point that out. Otherwise, there'd be confusion.
Yes, I get paid by Audible to talk about Audible with the only other person who watches these.
Ouch. You realize now if I actually put this up on my channel and anyone watches it, it'll seem like the most depressing thing ever.
Oh, who cares?
I mean, I think I've mentioned that I'm the only one who watches videos before, but seriously, Greg. Come on, you gotta hope that someone someday is gonna watch this. I have 6 subscribers, Greg. 6.
If they've gotten 40 minutes in, you know...
That's true, who knows?
They're not gonna
be turned off by this.
Now.
Yeah, most of my subscribers are probably Russian bots anyway, you know, but I feel compelled to upload for the sake of those Russian bots. They worked hard to subscribe to my channel. You never know, it's funny. I mean, I've been looking at a lot of interesting YouTube channels recently. Channels that have, like, several tens of thousands of subscribers, but are still fairly niche. And you'll look back at these people's older videos, and they still only have, like, 200 or 300 views on them.
True.
It's like some of these people, if you look at their average video, I'm beating them in terms of views that I get on videos.
That is weird.
Maybe that's just because I watch myself more than other YouTubers tend to, but, you know.
Well, one thing you'll see also is sometimes really old channels will have like lots of subscribers, but these are people who just never unsubscribe.
Right, and they get tiny amounts of views. I always find that very sad, you know? Like, one of my favorite channels to watch is The D-Pad, which it's just this bunch of guys who live in the Boston area. Guys and girls. And they have, I think, several tens of thousands of subscribers, and yet an average video of theirs will get 200 views. And I'm like, geez, people, why are you subscribed to someone if you're not interested in what they do? Like, I unsubscribe to people when I'm not interested in seeing their videos anymore.
That's really happened to Epic Mealtime, although I feel like they've run it on themselves.
Yeah, they've been on a downward spiral for a long time. I remember seeing a dead-on parody of Epic Mealtime about 7 years ago. So.
Jack's Films?
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
my heart just stopped. It just happened.
Their problem is they just never went anywhere new.
Right, it was always the same thing. And it's not like it's particularly clever. It's like combine a bunch of really bad-for-you food.
Yeah.
You know, like anyone can do that, and in terms of funny home videos, that only goes so far. People who want viral videos on the internet, they want some variety. They're not just gonna watch you cram tons of food in your face. That was the joke that Jack's Film was riffing on, was like they really had nothing to it except combine every horrible food you can think of. And
bacon.
Everything has bacon in it. Was that accurate? Did they actually put bacon in frickin' everything in Epic Mealtime?
They did actually put a lot of bacon in a lot of things.
I don't get the bacon obsession. It's like, you know, good bacon is amazing, but it belongs to its own category. You don't put bacon in everything.
It was a meme. It was kind of a tired meme even then.
But they made products based on it, you know? Like, memes shouldn't become that ubiquitous.
Pseudo-parallelism. I love that.
Pseudo-parallelism? I don't even know what that is. I need to look that up.
I mean, you can kind of guess just from the components, but...
the execution of parallel processes on a unicore system. It's a computing term. Which I guess makes sense. This is a video game.
Oh, jeez. If you use tech jargon, you could do some horrifying things.
I just wish this game had the word cruft in it. Cruft is my favorite tech term. I learned it from Seamus Young's blog. You've heard of the term, right?
I think so.
Yeah, cruft is old code that you haven't stripped out of your system, even though it doesn't mean anything anymore.
Oh, interesting. No, I had not.
Most programming libraries are full of cruft. Windows is so full of cruft that that's actually the reason why it's so slow and bad.
Ah, well.
Or at least it was. For a long time, almost every Windows thing was based on the last one. And they didn't strip anything out, they just added new stuff.
What was the achievement you got? 1% Muse, the Lord of the Rings?
I have no idea what that's for because I haven't gotten anything more than 1% on any of these. But anyway, here is where the thing stopped recording, so we are going to meld this in a bit. See you guys in a bit. So, this is the end of Epistory. This was originally supposed to be part of episode 5. Unfortunately, OBS just stopped recording for some reason, so now we're going to look at it. There is no combat in this section. No gameplay, really. Just the final segment and the credits. So the last thing she said is, I want to go home. And we're going to be running across just a few sort of metaphysical things here, representing the levels we've gone through. I shouldn't have said there's no gameplay left. There's this.
Aw.
Yeah. So here we have the Creation City part, and it's leading to the Ice Mausoleum. Yeah, so this is sort of like straddling the border of consciousness. Like she was in her dream before, and now this is the moment where she's about to wake up. Naturally, she's confused. Most people are when they wake up from a coma.
Not let you type I?
No, it did. I'm the one doing all this. I originally thought the game was going to do this, like showing that she was taking over her own consciousness again. But no, you type this in yourself. Actually very similar to the end of Icarus Proudbottom. What? Chicka Chicka Slim Shady. No, that's not her name. It's this woman. We never find out her actual name.
Hi.
But we do find out that she was in fact in the hospital. Surrounded by the fragments, you may see them in the background, which I think are paintings made by her. They're all watercolors. And get well cards. Oh, and an awesome song. No indie game is complete without it.
So this is like kind of like a coma dream.
That's exactly what it was. She was like literally her whole life passed before her while she was unconscious.
God, have you ever watched Chicken Run?
Yes, but I've forgotten everything about it.
Oh, my life flashed before my eyes. It was very boring.
Oh, because she's a chicken. Raised in a farm. That's actually kind of dark. No.
That movie was kind of dark.
That's true. This is totally like tangential to this game, but I saw Chicken Run in a double feature with The Perfect Storm in a drive-in movie theater with my dad. And The Perfect Storm was so boring that I fell asleep about 20 minutes into it, and I don't remember anything about the movie. Anyway. No, this song they have at the end here, it's really like... I have a weakness for this kind of song. It's got nice acoustic guitar. And a bit of like dobro sounding guitar in the background. And a female voice, which has been definitely studio produced, but not so much that it sounds like obvious auto-tune. It's very sweet sounding. I feel like a lot of songs in the 70s sounded like this. It's the kind of production style that I'm really into. And ironically, it's like poorer people today, people who can't afford as much production, sound like this, which is how songs used to sound, and I like it better. The more money they spend on producing someone's voice these days, the more I hate it. You ever wonder how much money was spent on like the digital effects in Black Eyed Peas songs? Things like that. All to produce that sound. So this is showing all the fragments I collected. I'm pretty sure that it leaves out anything you didn't collect. So if you fail to get fragments, they'll be sort of incomplete images. I could be wrong.
That is actually... Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
That is a pretty good bonus.
It's an interesting idea. The only problem with it is I'm not sure if I'm actually right. It could be just like you see them while you're playing, and then at the end you see the whole thing. This image was one I found very interesting. The one where she's wearing the jacket and the short skirt, but she sees herself in a dress. It's, you know, identity issues. Very relatable these days. Like Labyrinth, you know? That movie brought up a lot of those concepts. It was really stupid at the same time, so I didn't appreciate it. So yes, this game was made by Fishing Cactus. They're a very interesting company. I look forward to seeing what they make next. What do you think of this game, Greg, now that we're mostly finished with it, except for the bonus?
I think it was great.
Yeah, it really is something unique.
It was a very good little indie game.